Hello and welcome to another episode of Nostalgic Pixel. I'm Brian, and this episode we're going to be taking a trip down memory lane and looking at Sega CD, specifically the launch of the Sega CD and how I came to get it, as well as a few other tidbits and thoughts and stories. But mostly we're just going to be talking about how I got the Sega CD. So I first learned about the Sega CD through magazines, through video game magazines like EGM. They were talking about what was going on in Japan. Mega CD was badass. It looked really cool. The screenshots in the EGM magazine I still have today are great. Those just like changed the way things were happening. At the same time, CDs were starting to show up in computers, and you're starting to see the potential there. I remember going to the computer store and seeing like Myst on there. But it was really cool. So because I knew advance of this for Christmas that year, the year before the Sega CD came out, I asked for a Sega CD, knowing full well it is not coming out in time for Christmas. I just knew it was coming out sometime later next year, and I knew I wanted to have it. It looked really cool, and just completely different new genres of games that weren't even possible were now possible. Whether that was good or bad, it was yet to be seen. It was neat. It was really cool. And I already saw with it wasn't the first CD system on console either, because I had already seen like the TurboGrafx-CD already had its CD add-on. That was the thing, and it existed. And I didn't know anyone who had one, but I did know people who had TurboGrafx-CD. Not many, very few. In fact, really one growing up, and then later on in like high school and college, I met two other people. So not a whole lot at the time growing up knowing on that system. But the Sega CD looked really cool. I really wanted to get it. So I asked for it for Christmas the year before, and I got an IOU for it, which was great. I held on to that IOU, and just thinking about it now, it's kind of funny because that system didn't come out till November of the next year. So when this was coming out, I knew the release date of this thing because it was being advertised, or at least for me, knowing I already was going to get the system. I was on the ball on when this thing was going to be available and can come out to buy it. So when I knew I had it, I pulled out my IOU and gave it to my parents, and my dad said, all right. And he went to Babbage's and got in line and picked one up and brought it home. And I remember at first it didn't work. I couldn't get it to work, and I was really concerned. I went over to my friend's house and plugged into his Genesis, and it worked just fine. So then I opened up my Genesis and saw that like one of the transistors or capacitors there was kind of exposed and touching like a metal panel right near the connector. So I just covered it up in like electrical tape just to so it wouldn't be touching, and it started working again. And then it was great. This Sega CD came with a bunch of pack-in games. It came with Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which was my first personal FMV game. It was really cool. I mean, it came with a little, booklet of the London Times that you could check out, and you could read. And you read the London Times in the game if you wanted to, but also just in your spare time you could just read it if you wanted to. But also just it kind of made it easier if you could just pull it open and look at it without having to dig out of the menus where you were sometimes. I had so much fun. I even remember hooking that up with my parents' VHS player at the time. It was pretty fancy. It had a zoom function. So even though the FMVs were really tiny, I could plug my Sega CD through that VHS player, zoom it up, and make the FMV pretty much full screen on my TV. Even though it looked bad enough already, zoomed up, it was just kind of a cool thing I could do. Considering in those scenes you didn't need to see really anything else at the time. When the video was playing, there weren't controls that you had to pay attention to during that. So it worked out. It was neat. I also loved playing like Sol-Feace. It was a shooter. I haven't played shooters in a while. I played them mostly in the arcades, was my experience prior, but it was nice to have them again. I've gone back now, and since that's one of my favorite genres to go back and revisit, because I didn't play as many of them, and also for me, they don't require a huge time commitment. I can pick it up, put it and play it for a little while, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour maybe, and then put it down. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy those games, but it was really neat to have that on there. And they came out with the Sega Genesis collection. Well, I did have a few of those. I didn't have them all. So it was cool to get Revenge of Shinobi. I hadn't played that one. Oh, I had played it at a friend's house, but I didn't really have it to play it on my own. That was fun. And then I also enjoyed having like Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage is great. Streets of Rage 2 is amazing. They're both really good, and I enjoy them. It took that Sega CD for me to start to appreciate that series, because at the time I had a Super Nintendo and a Genesis, but I had Final Fight on the Super Nintendo, and I just saw, at the time, we just by look at screenshots and stuff, the main character and stuff looked a lot, Axel and Cody looked a lot alike, so it just seemed like a blatant ripoff. Well, it was, maybe it was, it took from a lot of places. It wasn't completely original in every way, but it was a lot of fun, and in its component, it was really original to me. I enjoyed playing it. It was always fun just to be able to pull up that car anytime you wanted, and just like out of nowhere, the car just shows up, and then there it is. But so I had a lot of fun playing them. I even like playing the CD graphics discs. They were fun, like Jimi Hendrix was on there, and it was cool. They had graphics on the screen. It never seemed that format ever took off, because that's the only one I have, and I know there's a couple out there, but at one point, like Philips photo CD discs were also doing CDGs, but you never, like, again, I don't know if it ever took off. The closest thing I think it gets used for it now is like karaoke discs. At the time, they figured out how to do it that way. I got it like a month before Christmas, which would have been just crazy, just thinking about that my parents would have to go make this big purchase 1 month before Christmas for last year's Christmas present. Because while that is an IOU, I got, some gifts and toys and stuff, but that was my big present. Or Sonic CD was my favorite game, and it was also my favorite Sonic game for the longest time. One of the coolest things I did with my Sega CD that I remember was when I was in a hotel room and I didn't have like a composite connection, and I didn't have the RF stuff to hook it up through it, so with the Sega CD. So basically I had my Game Gear at the time that I'd recently gotten like earlier in that year in May, and this is like in December. I had my Game Gear with a TV tuner, and we had a bunch of little video bits with our video Walkman that we had, and I was able to hook my Genesis and Sega CD into my Game Gear, and I was playing Sonic CD through the Game Gear screen, which wasn't very great, but it was just a cool feat. Just put a kickstand on the Game Gear on top of the Genesis. It's on top of the Sega CD that I'm playing. It was neat. This has just been me ranting about like my memories of the Sega CD and getting it and asking for it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks again for watching.